Perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's 3:30, and I know people are really excited. Yes, thank you for the red card. It's not soccer. Calm down. I know people are really excited to get on to their CAF meeting and different things like that. So we'll start on time. Bonjour et bienvenue à ACAM 2022, de retour ensemble. We're very happy to welcome you to the 2022 AMM. It's so great to be meeting in person in this beautiful city. As you know, I'm Kevin Dixon. It's been my honor to be your president for the past year. And although I'm getting a lot of red cards over there, I do plan on staying around for the second year. As I look around, I'm happy to see so many familiar faces and to welcome new people to this profession. And hopefully we get a chance to get to know each other in person over the next day or so. I want to congratulate you, all the members, for all your hard work over the past year. We're stronger together. Tomorrow, we're going to do individual awards, but as a group, we're quite strong. We've made great inroads across Canada, and that's because of every day that you go to work. Okay. I would like to start by acknowledging the Indigenous people of all the lands that we're here on today, whether here in Quebec City or wherever our virtual online people are joining us from. You're likely on some Indigenous unceded territory. I encourage you to learn something about wherever you are in an effort to build bridges between our communities, build compassion, friendship, and a future together. Today is Remembrance Day. Those of us who joined us for the parade, thank you very much. It's all day that I'll be thinking about my friends and veterans that have come before. It doesn't just end now. All right. Sorry, that was clumsy, but anyway. We hold this AMM annually for you, the members, to understand board business, to vote on the budget and vote on policy. As per the guidelines, we've had all the documents posted for a few months. So hopefully you've had a chance to review those. There will be a chance for questions at the end, and it's your opportunity to guide this organization. Okay. Before we get started, too much with the meat of the meeting, if you will, this has been a busy year. Okay, the demands, the tasks, the accomplishments over the year has just increased time and again. Each province is showing some movement forward, and that's because of the efforts of members, advocate, board members, and staff. I want to highlight the fact that even if you're not on the board, even if you're not on the staff, every day you go to work and look after patients, you're acting as an advocate, you're advancing the profession. So by all means, please take advantage, get involved with the board, but remember that every day you go to work, you're an advocate. I do want to highlight the efforts of our staff. Okay, when you look at the number of jobs they're doing, with how many they are, they're stretched very thin, and they've put together a tremendous quality of work and helped advance this profession. So I'd like to thank Christy and Sandra and Brian for joining us. Thank you very much for all your hard work. So I'd like to introduce everybody that's at the table here with me. For this year's AMM, I'll be joined by Kirsten Lomala. Kirsten is our incoming president-elect and our current treasurer. And Patrick Nelson is our executive director. We'll each be doing different things during this presentation, and you'll see us move back and forth, but we'll all be available at the end for questions. So let's get started. Sandra, do we have quorum? Okay. With quorum, I call the 2022 annual member meeting to order with a start time of 3:33. Okay. There's a few mechanics that we have to talk about, a few logistics. As you know, there's the in-person audience, members, participants, that's you. And then we have a number of people online. Do we have a sense of how many people are joining us by phone at all, or is it? Okay, welcome to the virtual participants. Thank you very much for taking the time out of the day to join us for this important meeting. So things I want you to know is all documents were posted to the AMM section of the CAPA website from August 15th to September 30th. As we covered, this meeting is both held in person and virtually. There's going to be some things to vote on. Those people that are here have a red and a green card. The table in the back's already practiced the red card. That's good. Virtual participants can raise their hands via the Zoom platform for their votes. If we have people joining us by phone, they're going to be able to vote by sending an email to the admin inbox, but I don't think that's going to be an issue today. During the open forum, if you have a question, and I hope you do, please stand up, use one of the microphones, introduce yourself and ask your question, and we will do the best we can to answer. For virtual participants, raise your hand on the virtual component, on the Zoom component, and wait to be called upon. Unmute your mic and then ask your question. You can also use the chat function for your question, and one of the staff members will read out the question to the group. Please make sure that you involve your name and who you would like to answer the question. The next thing is to get started with the approval of the agenda. So the agenda was posted on the screen. The agenda that you see there was posted the 5th of August, and we'll move to the vote so I'd like to ask for a vote that the agenda be approved as you see it. The vote will be moved by the motion will be moved by Kirsten Lomala and seconded by Ryan Bennett. So if we could have yays and nays for the agenda as you see it. Thank you, everybody. So the agenda is approved. The next thing is hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at last year's minutes. They were posted for review on September 30th. And if there's we'll go directly to the vote. So we recommend that it be approved, and that's moved by Kirsten and seconded by Ryan. So we can have vote yays. Thank you. So that's approved. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about the board of directors right now. I'd like to welcome the new members to the board of directors. The new members are Kirsten Lomala, president-elect. Lee Spencer will be the director of Alberta. Kathleen Abreu is director, Newfoundland, Labrador. Is she online with us? It's okay. And Aaron Sefton will be director, Prince Edward Island. Eric Thompson will act as the student representative, and Andy Carrier will be the CAF representative. Thank you all very much for your involvement in the board. The more people we have in the board of directors, the stronger it is, the more viewpoints are involved, and the better we can sort of navigate our way forward. We have a number of alternate directors. Okay. So from Alberta, we have Hannah Weens. From Saskatchewan, we have Ashley Millam. And from Manitoba, it's Callie Brown. Thank you very much. I look forward to working with you all. I'd like to add just a little personal message here. For those of you who are not on the board of directors, we often have vacancies. Please look at your lives, think about how getting involved. The more diversity, the more voices we have, the better this profession will be. I'd like to say goodbye and thank the efforts of the student representative, Hannah Keith. We're very grateful for your time on the board, and we wish you the best of luck, and hopefully you come back in a different role. So we do have quite a full board. It's the largest it's been in quite a while. And with this, we hope that we can guide the profession. Thank you very much for everybody who's chosen to get involved with the board of directors. So I'm going to invite Sandra to come and talk a little bit about certification. Thank you.
You can go to the next slide, Christy. So as you know, PAC is a committee that reports directly to the CAPA Board of Directors. These are our committee members. They work hard. Our hardest working committee is definitely our test committee members. We are currently seeking members in the allied health profession and consumer rep, so a public representative. So we'll be going and sending out requests for those members. However, if you are interested in test committee or CPD committee, please feel free to come and see me, send me an email, or give me a call. Be happy to talk about the requirements for both CPD committee and test committee. Next slide. So the Certification Council held 2 virtual meetings this year so far, and we have our next meeting scheduled for November 30th, which is the time where they will approve the pass mark for the 2022 exam. So currently our test committee is doing, as Patrick loves to hear, angoffing the exam at the moment. And so that is where they just score each and every question. And then we have a discrepancy meeting after that. And then we set a pass mark and have it recommended to the Certification Council, and then they approve it. So we aim to have results for the 2022 exam out by the 1st or 2nd week of December. This year we had 77 eligible Canadian new grads to write the exam, and in total we had 94 people write the exam, and that's a combination of new graduates, rewrites, and USPAs. This is the 3rd year that we have offered the exam online, and we are moving towards that, and we will never go back to bubble sheets and or paper exams. So, our exam is administered by Measure Learning and ProctorU. And I think that's about it. So I'd be happy to take any of your questions at the end of the open forum or during the or anytime during the weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. So the next item on the agenda is the financial report. So with that, I'd like to invite Patrick, our Executive Director, to discuss the financial report with you.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm often encouraged by our French members to say some things in French. So since this is my first time up here, I hope you'll indulge me. I see some smiles, which is nerve-wracking, but here we go anyway. C'est la partie embarrassante de ma présentation où je fais semblant de pouvoir parler couramment le français. You're laughing a little bit, which tells me you understand a little bit. Merci beaucoup à tous d'être venus ici au Québec. Il est plus difficile que jamais de voyager et de s'éloigner de son lieu de travail et de sa famille. Nous vous sommes reconnaissants d'avoir pris le temps d'avoir fait de ce congrès une priorité. Merci également aux membres des forces armées canadiennes, particulièrement aujourd'hui. La plupart du temps, votre service passe inaperçu. Aujourd'hui, nous devons réfléchir et vous remercier personnellement. Merci. Okay, next slide. So in anticipation of Kirsten doing some of our formalities, you're going to be asked to approve, accept the financial statements from the board and to approve the auditor. I'll just give you a high-level summary of where our books are at. So most of you will have seen a slide that looks a little bit like this before. And just so you know what you're looking at, the top column is our financial statements, or what we call the actuals from 2015 onwards. And I will highlight for you the first column there, which is where the subsidies from the government or from the Canadian Armed Forces ended. So our revenues were the highest they had ever been that year. That's that 1.2 million that you see there. In addition, I'll point to you that the expenses were the highest at that point in time that they have ever been. And obviously that was unsustainable. So we spent some time as a board and with you here at this meeting, working through some of those numbers, working through a sustainability plan, we called it. And largely we have kept pretty close to that plan as we have moved forward. So you can see in the red numbers, we were running deficits for 4 years. So using our retained earnings or money that was in the bank to subsidize that deficit. And we were working hard to reduce expenses, but also increase revenues over that time. The last column there on the top is the actuals from 2021. I'll highlight those only for one reason. So that was an anomaly year. That was COVID. We had to cancel the conference. So revenues were a little bit down, largely because of the sort of lower than we had anticipated, because the conference brings in revenue. At the same time, the conference is a pretty significant expense for us. So that significant surplus, that 115,363 that you see midway down the column there, I refer to that as a little bit of a phantom surplus, in that it wasn't built on realistic numbers. So we still had a surplus. So I don't want you to think that we didn't. It wasn't a real one. It was a real one. It just wasn't one that we had anticipated. I'll also highlight for you that other organizations faced quite a different problem that year. Most ran significant deficits and were forced to use their retained earnings. So despite not being prepared for a pandemic, I was very pleased that we managed through it in the way that we did. We brought an in-year budget to the board to pivot, to make some adjustments, and we were short-staffed a little bit. The financial statements that you're going to accept today, so that's that column on the bottom, the 2021, 2022 column. Kirsten will have the budget. So the difference between budget and actuals is the budget is what the board approves at the beginning of the year. The actuals is how we finish the year. So Kirsten's got those precise numbers, but we brought in slightly more revenue than we had anticipated. And we spent a little bit more than we had anticipated. And the result of that was what I will call our first real surplus, or perhaps better framed as a balanced budget, which again is, we're in great shape as an organization, and it has enabled us to make investments in staff, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And you can see that the out years there are probably not, so that's the budget that was passed by the board in 22-23. We haven't yet got our Q2 or second quarter financials back yet. My anticipation is that revenues will be lower than expected because the conference is much smaller than we had expected. And for the same reason, our expenses will be lower than we had anticipated. But all signs point to us being in great shape this year as well. And with that, I will pass it over to Kirsten.
Thank you, Patrick. As per our bylaws and the Canada Not-for-Profit Act, annually we provide you, the members, with our financial statements. This is a formality which ensures that you can see and track how our finances are doing. Our audited financial statements were posted for your review on the annual members meeting in the members only area of the CAPA website on September 30th of 2022. For the 2021-2022 fiscal year, our review engagement was performed by Marcel Lavallee and was completed on the 14th of July, 2022. Marcel Lavallee has been CAPA's auditors for many years. We trust them and they have provided us with great service. With their review engagement completed, we present the following. For the 2021-2022, our budgeted reviews were projected at $703,339.37. The audited actuals were $746,769.54, which means we brought $43,430.17 more than was projected. Budgeted expenses were projected at $703,041, and the audited actuals were $726,092, which means we spent $23,050 more than we projected. Overall, for the year ending the 31st of March, 2022, the association ended the year with a surplus of $20,677. Kevin, want to do the motion?
So at this point, we'd like to ask you to show your approval of that financial report in the form of a vote. So moved by, thank you, Kirsten, and seconded by Ryan Bennett. The membership moves or votes to approve the financial report. Thanks, everyone.
As recommended by the CAPA Board of Directors, be it resolved. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. I think I am, sorry. Now is the time to us to appoint our auditors for our current fiscal year, 2022-2023. Also, per our bylaws, the membership must annually appoint auditors for the current fiscal year. Marcel Lavallee has been the CAPA's auditor for several years, and the Board of Directors recommend that once again, they be appointed for the 2022-2023 fiscal year. Kevin, you want to do that's everything.
So we're asking for your approval to retain Marcel Lavallee. So this moved by Kirsten, seconded by Ryan, and I think the yeas have it. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Kirsten, for the financial reports. So let's see, where are we at? I think I got turned around. Patrick, okay, yeah. A lot of papers here. Sorry, everyone.
Okay, so I'm going to take you through a little bit of a highlight reel on some of our activities and most important files. And I'm going to start with a staff update. So I mentioned that as we have worked to balance the budget, and now that we have a sort of a sustainable budget in place, we're able to grow and finally invest in our staff. So we actually have five positions in the budget. We have, I'm pleased to introduce Brian Lardner, who most of you will have met by now. Brian's our newest Western Manager of Advocacy and Stakeholder Relations. So big thanks to Brian. He's officially been here for 9 days, maybe 10 days, and he's only made 8 or 9 mistakes. So, which is off to a pretty good start. I kid, he's off to a great start. So thanks, Brian. All of you or most of you will know Christy and Sandra, and I'll share with you that We have been through thick and thin, the three of us, since 2015. Most of it's been a lot of fun. Sometimes it's been a little hairy, to say the least. I'll probably share too much, but I always do. We had the other position that we have is a conference planner position, and you'll notice that they're not here. We had an individual in that spot, and they unfortunately resigned the spot about a month ago, which the timing was not impeccable, to say the least. So as what tends to happen and has happened over the last 8 years is some combination of Christy and or Sandra jump in and save the day. So I'm very lucky as an executive director to have the two of them as my partners professionally. I'll also share with you that they're close friends of mine now, and we have been through lots on a personal note as well. So that's probably enough. I could go on for 5 or 10 minutes on how important they are to this association, but I hope you'll join me in thanking them again and again. The other thank you I have to make is to the board. The board is tremendously supportive of the staff. We have a very active board, and I'm going to share with you some of the activities that they've been part of. They spend an inordinate amount of time supporting us, jumping in, stepping in. We're a small staff, so the requirements of them are much larger than they would be. And I'll remind you that they're volunteers. They too have families and real jobs that we take them away from regularly. So I hope you'll join me again in thanking the board for all of their time and effort and support. And lastly, I call out some of the board members throughout, but the individual I want to call out to start off with is Kevin. Kevin's been president for a year. He's been tremendously supportive. You won't know that he has stepped in over the years prior to taking on that role to help us navigate through some difficult challenges. And this year has been no exception. Kevin is always willing to step in and help. He does media at the last minute. If we need his support, we get it unconditionally. He's got a great sense of humor, which most of you will know. So big special thanks to Kevin for his partnership over the last year, and we look forward to working with him next year. Okay. Next slide. So a small little piece, we're busy refreshing the website. It's gotten a little stale. You probably won't notice some of the changes, but it should be more usable. We're trying to connect it up so that you can register there better. So we're hoping that will make our lives easier, but also your lives easier. So have a look. It's not there yet, but it should be up before the end of the year. So we'll put an announcement in the bulletin about that. Next slide. I hope some of you have filled out the member survey. It fell on the back burner for a few years, but last year we resurfaced it. It's very important to monitor our progress, to get your input. We've got some benchmarks established from last year, so I hope you'll take the time to fill it out and provide your feedback. Maybe don't do it now, but if you get bored, you could perhaps do it now. Next slide. Okay, the physician assistant title. You likely know that in the US, APA, or the American Association of PAs, their House of Delegates or their members, just as we meet here, made a decision to formally change the name of physician associate. That doesn't mean that all of the states and jurisdictions within the US make the same change. But that spurred some questions from members at the last meeting and the meeting prior to that, I believe, just about what we were going to do here in Canada. So we made a commitment to you that we would start to engage with our key stakeholders. So we have done a little bit of that work. So we reached out first to medical associations and regulators. It seemed to make sense. They tend to be our first partners. They're an important stakeholder, perhaps the most important stakeholder. And without sharing sort of the direct responses from them, I think it's fair to say that we got a pretty cold response for most of the regulators and from the medical associations. That is without spending a lot of time socializing and doing some qualitative work with them. We did get some positive responses, but I think it's fair to say, and we talked to the board about this yesterday, that it was pretty cold or cool, perhaps. So our next step is to, that doesn't mean we're done. The next step will be to reach out to our funders or governments to see what they have to say about the matter. We will work on getting a survey out to members. I'll share with you that we'll probably qualify in that survey just the kinds of responses we've been getting from stakeholders, but also the work that will be needed to make. So to put it differently, APA made the change or directed a change. And of course, we don't work directly with them, but if you do a little Googling, there's not a whole lot of states who have also made the change. So the association made a change, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the legislative bodies that are responsible for titles and things like that have gone along with it, which frankly isn't a giant surprise. I'll also share with you that there's 150 some odd thousand PAs in the US, so they can do things and direct things. We have still under 1,000 members, so we don't have the same kind of muscle that they have. Nevertheless, we'll probably qualify in the survey some of the logistics that would have to go along with getting a change, even if we were to make that recommendation. So you can look for that. And if there's comments at the end or when you see the board or myself over the next couple of days, we'd happily hear them from you as well. Next slide. Of course, so if it's not obvious, the conference is a little different than we have seen in the past. We're super plussed that we were able to get almost 100 people here in person, but that frankly pales in comparison to the 200 plus we would tend to get in the last number of conferences pre-COVID. We are hyper aware that there's lots of reasons for that. One of them is COVID fatigue, I'll call it. So people probably still have some trepidation about traveling, being around people. I think it's also true as healthcare workers that you have a different mindset when it comes to traveling and being away from your workplaces and families than you might have felt pre-COVID. So we think there's good reason for that. I have shared with some of you over the last couple of days, the one thing that I don't think maybe has come through a little bit more, getting to Quebec City isn't the easiest place to get to. There's not direct flights from everywhere, so our sense is perhaps that had a little to do with it. So when it became apparent that our numbers were going to be lower than we expected, we worked really hard to renegotiate with the hotel. We make these contractual arrangements with them 3 and 4 years in advance. So this was long before COVID had begun that we had these contracts in place. Frankly, we're quite thankful that the hotel was able to be nimble on some of our food and beverage commitments, our room block commitments and things like that. So if you haven't noticed, there's lots of things have been scaled down. For example, the member reception is something that we would tend to, or the welcome reception is something that we would tend to do at the hotel. We would perhaps give you some cocktails and food on the way in. That wasn't the case last night. The awards dinner tomorrow night isn't a big fancy sit-down 4-course meal. It's a cocktail reception with some hors d'oeuvres instead of a full meal. So prepare yourselves accordingly. And I thank you. I guess my message is thank you for indulging us. Thank you for making the commitment to be here. Those that are online, thank you. Thank you for doing that. And I just wanted to share some of those things that, if you haven't noticed, are a little bit different than they were before. Oh, and I guess the other thing I was supposed to mention is we will be doing with the board, but also with the membership, a little bit of a postmortem in anticipation of our conference in New Brunswick next year. To see how we can navigate through that, see how you and other members are feeling about getting there. It's early, but there's some decisions we're going to have to take fairly quickly as far as readjusting our plans going forward for conferences. So please share that with your board members or with staff over the next couple of days if you have that opportunity. Next slide. And one more. Okay, so I'll give you a quick highlight reel on some of our advocacy activities. I'm not going to read every little point on the slides, but I'll highlight what I think are the more important things. So as the health workforce challenges garnered a lot of the spotlight over the last couple of years, this isn't a new problem, but more people have been talking about it since COVID came along. We really pressed the pedal to the metal on our advocacy as far as expanding training spots. I have spent lots of time with Christy over the last year, potentially, just talking to anyone and everyone from governments to medical schools, to the Council of Ontario Universities, for example, just about the need to expand the abysmal number of training spots that we have in this country. We have 69 training spots in Canada. And if I compare that to the hundreds and thousands that exist for other professions, I don't need to share with you that there isn't a health professional that can do more and be trained as quickly and provide the value to the healthcare system that PAs can. So we have spent a lot of time talking about that, and I'll probably miss a few examples, but we've had great conversations in Alberta. We understand U of C continues to talk about implementing a program. U of Winnipeg, we understand or believe that they will be moving to expand the number of training spots there. We hope soon. Saskatchewan, I'll talk a little bit about later, but we had a very interesting meeting with the Minister of Health there over the last month. So we think there's potentially a program to come at the University of Saskatoon. I always forget that one. Anybody? Yes, thanks, Todd. That's where the medical school is there. So we're quite optimistic about that. In Ontario, which of course is where the most medical schools are, we have had very productive conversations with Western, with U of Ottawa, with Queen's about introducing programs there. We think a few of them have put in formal proposals to government. And we know that McMaster and U of T have been working and advocating for an expansion of the existing programs. So we're quite excited and optimistic about that. And lastly, Christy and I talked to the dean at Dalhousie, I think it was this week, Monday, just about the potential for a program there. So pretty exciting. If you can think about the potential of perhaps hundreds of seats in the country rather than 69. I think that bodes well for the profession and the growth of the profession and the growth of this association, frankly, going forward. The board supported in our planning and budgeting for this year, a proposal to hire a consultant or an external agency to help us look at funding options for PAs in particular to help stimulate the growth of PAs in fee-for-service practices. It's quite difficult, as you know, in a fee-for-service model to hire a PA because of those restrictions that exist for delegated work, for billing for delegated work in Canada. So we have recently contracted the Conference Board of Canada to do that work. We're going to engage with some doctors and PAs to build out or help them build out a handful of models that we can then bring to governments as far as how a fee-for-service discounted billing model might work in Canada. So we're pretty excited about that. And we hope that will mean the potential for more jobs in Canada that aren't necessarily just funded by government or reliant on government. Next slide. We've talked about HHR. We have met, Kevin actually met with the Minister of Health, the Federal Minister of Health, Minister Duclos in Nova Scotia, along with Aaron in the summer, I guess it was summer of this year. It's amazing how time flies. So a pretty exciting meeting. We've met with the federal government a lot. I think they're always challenged about how they can insert themselves into what they believe is a provincial jurisdiction, and to give them some credit, the provinces tend to have struggle a lot when the feds insert themselves into these things. But we have had some productive conversations with correctional services, with ISC, with Indigenous Services Canada. about the potential for implementing some PAs into those areas, but also perhaps tacit support for the federal government funding some training spots. In particular, perhaps some PA spots for Indigenous communities specifically. So we'll see how that goes. The CMA has conducted a pretty significant study on healthcare workers, so we participated in that. Next slide. I talked about ISC, Indigenous Services Canada. They have been quite interested in meeting with us recently. I think we've had 6 or 7 meetings with them over the last couple months, which is pretty exciting. We hope that that will turn into some investments in PAs working. I lost my screen again. Oh, there it is. PAs working within in Indigenous communities. So we'll see how that goes. Some of you brought forward the unfortunate fact that the Canada Loan Forgiveness Program leaves PAs out. So we have sent a formal letter to the federal government to change that. They're in the midst of a review, so we'll see how that goes. We're hopeful that they'll add PAs to the list. I do a little bit of a cross-country tour, starting in BC. I feel like I've been up here for 8 years telling you how hard it's been to advocate in BC. So I won't go through the list. We've done many of the things that we have done over the years. We've had some great meetings with the opposition leaders, with the BC Health Coalition. But of course, they're not government. The government remains difficult to convince to move forward. But we've got this little important PA stakeholder group in BC. 2 past presidents, so Eric Demers and Trevor Stone, have moved to the Great West Coast and are active participants in driving change there. And we've got our newest board member, Lisa Stewart. They're conveniently sitting at the same table over here. So we have been working diligently, perhaps better said, they have been working diligently to convince a community to bring a proposal forward to solve a physician shortage problem. So we've been helping as best we can. We have felt for some time that rather than CAPA going and banging our fists on desks and trying to convince the Minister of Health to make a change, that if a community brings forward a solution to a problem, it will be harder to say no. So Port Hardy is this community that is going to take this on, and a great shout out to Lisa, Eric, and Trevor, who's not here, for their ongoing work to make that happen. And you can clap here. I think it's appropriate. I'll also share a small little nugget of optimism. You may know that the premier stepped down, and there's a new premier who is David Eby. And we believe that he will be changing his cabinet, including the Minister of Health. So with change sometimes comes opportunity. So we're watching closely, and we'll be ready to step up and wave the PA flag as soon as that happens. If I move on to Alberta, we have, I don't think I'm sharing too much, but there's been some recent chatter about increasing the compensation of Alberta PAs. They've been stuck, as many of you have been, at the same rate for some time, and there's been some progress in recent months. So we hope to see that progress move forward quickly. Kirsten Lomela is our board director. She's done amazing work. We're so pleased that she's put her name in the hat to become our next president next year. So big thanks to Kirsten for ongoing work. The one highlight piece, we spent a lot of time working through how to organize PAs in Alberta, or to perhaps more directly put it, to help them unionize. That's kind of an evil word that we don't use all that often, but we were able to help the Manitoba PAs do that. We've helped hospital-based PAs in Ontario do that. So we worked closely with Kirsten and others to investigate, explore the options available. And I think it's fair to say there was consensus from the members that based on the price, the cost, based on where things are at right now in Alberta, we're going to put that on the back burner for now. But we're anticipate bringing that forward in a couple of years, perhaps as things evolve there, or more importantly, as the number of PAs grows in Alberta. Next slide. I highlighted Saskatchewan a little bit. A lot of credit goes to Todd Bryden for his work in Saskatchewan. He was if you lived in Saskatchewan, you probably wouldn't have seen the newspapers if you didn't live in Saskatchewan, but Todd was on the news for a few days, which was pretty exciting. And we've been working closely. I'll share with you that we meet with ministers of health fairly regularly. BC is an exception, which I can't help but call out. But the meeting with the Minister of Health in Paul Merriman, I almost forgot that, was one of the most refreshing political meetings I've had in 8 years of doing this work. So he listened intently. He made very firm commitments about his commitment to introduce PAs early next year. And at one point in time, the board's heard me say this a few times, but at one point in time near the end of the meeting, he said, well, I want to meet again soon. When I hear that, I think, oh, well, there'll be another meeting in 6 months or maybe 8 months. We had another meeting in 2 weeks, literally. That's how excited he is about implementing PAs in Saskatchewan. So all of that said, I didn't follow my notes at all, but all of that said, he has asked his officials, we've talked to his deputy minister, and they are working on a 3-pronged approach to introduce a training program, to regulate PAs, and to fund PAs, which is pretty exciting and would be a great boon for PAs in Canada. So thanks to Todd for his leadership on that file. And now I feel bad because I don't think we gave Kirsten the applause that she also deserves for her work in Alberta. Although I'm sure she hates that. Manitoba, we have been working closely with Steve in Manitoba, including with the Ministry of Health to talk about funding and more training spots. I highlighted for you that we anticipate the program in Winnipeg to be expanded shortly or soon, or we're hopeful at least. And there's certainly been some work in Manitoba to explore different funding models. That project that I referred to about the Conference Board of Canada, I think is going to serve a useful purpose across the country, but in particular in Manitoba, where they exclusively fund PAs through government. So I think there's an opportunity there. But Steve has been a great advocate. He's met with the CPSM about expanding things there. So I don't think Steve's here, but a big thanks. He's probably online. A big thanks to Steve for all of his work in Manitoba. Okay, Ontario. I'm not going to follow the slide here at all. A few quick things. I talked about training spots, so we're pretty excited about the opportunity in Ontario. We think that this year, but perhaps more realistically early next year, there will be a significant expansion of existing programs and an introduction of a handful of programs. So that's exciting. Regulation, you'll recall that last summer, I think, we were able to convince the Minister of Health to do the legislative work and pass the legislation necessary to regulate PAs. So PAs were added to the Medicine Act. We thought that was going to be the hard part. As it turns out, getting the regulation done at the college turned out to be the part that took longer, perhaps. So we worked closely with the CPSO. We established a little bit of a committee of Ontario PAs to support that. Leslie's a part of that. Thanks to Leslie for her work on that. It suddenly stopped. The ministry pulled the pin. I don't blame the college. The ministry pulled the pin on it. We're still not totally sure why, but I'm pleased to tell you that I think about 4 weeks ago, we spent some time working with the Premier's office and the Minister's office, encouraging them to get that work underway again. And roughly a month ago, we heard from the CPSO that they have taken their proposal off the shelf. They've knocked the dust off it, and it is coming forward again. And I just heard from them this morning that, so I'm sharing this here first, which I probably shouldn't do, but We expect that they will have a proposal out for consultation by the spring. So they have their own internal processes. They have to bring things to their council, and then they're required to do a pretty extensive consultation with stakeholders, which is more of a public consultation. So their expectation, our hope is that that will be out in the spring. And I think that means it can be passed in the fall when their council meets again. So we'll keep you posted on that. We'll send you something more formal by a bulletin, but frankly, that's exciting that'll be moving forward. And perhaps lastly, in Ontario, I'll just highlight that we've got a group of family health team PAs, Kaylin Hill, Donna Blaney, and Catherine Verdi, who've been very active in encouraging us to refresh our advocacy work on behalf of PAs working in family health teams. It is very fair to say that I think those PAs are perhaps the most undervalued PA in the healthcare system in the country. They have been just the way the compensation grid works and the way the Ministry of Health moves forward or doesn't move forward is perhaps a better way to describe it. They've been a victim of the not being regulated and the way the grid works. So we have been working closely with Kaylin's here. So a big thanks to Kaylin for her work. So we've been, and Kaylin can knit at the same time. I clearly can't do two things at once. So we've been working closely with them to convince AFTO and government to make sure that we're active participants in the work that they are undertaking to review that grid. So that doesn't mean it's going to necessarily change, but we're doing the work we need to do. And most importantly, we got to get regulation done in Ontario so that those PAs in particular can get the compensation they deserve. I think I'll stop there on Ontario and move on to the East Coast. And I'm probably taking up more time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. Quebec has been relatively quiet. One of the reasons we wanted to come to Quebec was because it's such a beautiful city, but also because Quebec has been generally really quiet when it comes to PAs. I don't know if Guillaume is in the room somewhere. I hope he is. Oh, there he is. You don't put your hand up like this. So I'm going to call Guillaume out because Guillaume has been a tremendous support to us as staff and helping to build out the conference. He's been a tremendous advocate over the last several weeks as far as raising the awareness of PAs and the fact that we're going to be here. We had a really productive meeting with a director from an official from the Quebec government, from the Ministry of Health yesterday. So that doesn't mean PAs are going to be rolled out in Quebec tomorrow, but it's a first. The door is open just a little bit, and I just want to give Guillaume lots of credit for all his help with the conference, but also in doing that advocacy work. So thank you, Guillaume. Merci. If I continue on to New Brunswick, Ryan Bennett's here somewhere. He's had big shoes to fill as Kevin moved into a bigger, better role, but Ryan's been a tremendous support. There's only 3 PAs in New Brunswick, or at least employed by the government. They're all work in the same emergency department. I might be sharing too much again, but we heard yesterday that from Kevin, I think, or maybe Ryan, that there is great talk about doubling the number at the emergency department in New Brunswick. I'll say to you, when these pilots happen or these small little things happen, the work that the PAs do in those pilots or in these small little institutions are so critical when it's new, right? If these pilot programs aren't successful or the PA doesn't do quality work, then that has a tremendous negative outlook on how things move forward. And the opposite is true in New Brunswick. We've got two PAs here today that have generally been doing all the work at the Everett Chalmers, and that has resulted in talk about an expansion into primary care, but also in doubling that number at the Everett Chalmers. So thanks to them, and congrats, Ryan. Nova Scotia, most of you will know a pilot project was introduced in orthopedics. Aaron Sefton is an individual we rely on heavily to do media, to share the success of that work. We haven't seen the review, but everyone who talks about it says it's been a tremendous success. Nova Scotia is talking about expanding that pilot into primary care, into emergency departments. Peter Thibault's not here, but he's the board director there, so he's been a tremendous help. So big thanks to both of them for all the work that's happened in Nova Scotia. It's a big boon in the East Coast to have that project working as well as it is. And then I think I'm almost done before Kevin gives me the cane and takes me off of here. Both, and maybe just as a final conclusion, both Newfoundland and PEI. Again, I think because of the great work that our PAs are doing in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, both PEI and Newfoundland are now talking about introducing PAs. Both ministers of health, I think, have made some commitments or at least referred to exploring PAs. So by themselves, that's not going to increase our numbers, but that footprint across the country, we're almost there. If we knock those two provinces off, if we get Saskatchewan, maybe Quebec, and then BC will have to come along. So I think that's it. We can take some questions at the end, but thank you very much for, oh, sorry, I got one more thing. So we, some of you might remember that 4 or 5 years ago, we introduced a video. The idea was to, in as short a way possible, display the value of PAs. So we have recently refreshed that video. It was getting a little stale without mentioning the pandemic and the need to expand training spots and the health workforce problems. So we're going to play it for you here if you haven't seen it. But I'll thank you as I exit. I'll thank you very much for your time and indulging me. Thank you. Wouldn't be a conference without some technical difficulty.
While they start the video, I'll go off slide for a moment here. And just Patrick gave a great overview of some of the details that have happened by province across Canada. Thank you for that. I want to share a thematic change to these meetings. So I first started as an advocate in 2016, 2017, where many of these meetings were painful PowerPoints. What is a PA? Okay. That's not the language of these meetings anymore. Okay. In May, Aaron and I met with the federal minister of health, and we had one of these decks of slides. What is a PA? And we were able to cut out 12 of them. They weren't needed. He said, oh, skip them. How do we get more? Well, that's a talk I'd rather have. Okay. So with the good work that everybody's doing and the expansion of the profession, we're using our advocacy time, these meetings, breaking down barriers to expand, not educating. So it's a tremendous change in the work that we're able to get done. You can see that in the slide after slide of meetings and progress and things like that. We're able to actually detail work on moving the profession forward, not just education. So I think that's something that the membership should be aware of, and that's due to your good work, the staff's good work, and Patrick. How am I doing? Keep yapping or just? Just like that.
Well, this isn't starting a new box. It's about history of healthcare support. With the chronic healthcare problems brought forward from the COVID-19 pandemic, now more than ever is the time for Canada to catch up. Hospitals are overwhelmed. There is a mounting surgical backlog and increasing burnout amongst medical professionals. Adding PAs to the Health Human Resources team will boost the effectiveness and efficiency of our healthcare system, widening the scope and reach of care it provides. An essential addition to any medical team, PAs work as an extension of the supervising doctor to help serve more patients. They perform patient assessments and develop diagnoses supported by evidence-based medicine. PAs manage comprehensive treatment missions, including a variety of surgical procedures. PAs are highly trained clinical professionals, utilizing the same medical model as physicians. Yet there are only 3 PA education programs in Canada, with only 69 training slots. Each year, thousands of young students apply to become PAs, and they are turned away. When every province in the country is desperate for highly trained health professionals, why are most provinces not training a single PA? We need more training slots and new PA programs. Physician assistants reduce wait times, increase early discharge rates, shorten length of hospital stays, reduce the doctor's workload, and enhance overall efficiency and cost effectiveness. At a time when our healthcare system is struggling to address health workforce issues and tackle post-pandemic challenges, Canada needs PAs more than ever before. Training more PAs will help with the shortage of healthcare professionals and are a way for the system to improve care and save money. Learn more about physician assistants and how they can improve healthcare for all.
So back to sort of the year in review, there's been some changes in the PA programs and personnel. So at the AMM, we like to recognize and educate people, some of the key players that are out there. So we'd like to congratulate Rebecca Mueller on her new role as Program Director of the Master of Physician Assistant Studies at the University of Manitoba. We also at the same time congratulate the new Medical Director with the University of Toronto, Dr. Jeff Goliski. And with that comes some farewells, although we hope we were able to work with them in the future. So from the University of Toronto, Dr. Leslie Nichol is departing, and University of Manitoba, Ian Jones is departing his role, although I'm sure we'll hear from Ian. Thank you and best wishes. Next slide. Yeah.
Rebecca wrote, thank you. Wow,
Oh,
thank you.
you're welcome. Well, earlier this year, I had the honor and pleasure to attend the final the convocation of the final graduating class of military physician assistants. This is personally a very special moment as a graduate of that program. It gave me a chance to go back to somewhere I trained and see a number of friends and to speak to that final class and maybe put a little pin on a key part of the physician assistant development in Canada. And so I welcome that class of graduates. I see them here today, and I look forward to this next phase of seeing PAs being trained in civilian universities. So we'll go to the next slide. I know I touched on this a little bit in the opening ceremonies, but this conference wouldn't happen without a lot of work. And it's a small group of people that does all that work. So our staff has been key. Thank you again, Sandra, Christy, Patrick. But I'd also like to Guillaume Couture, Jean-Nicolas Chagnon, Sharon Okudowski, Eric Mayo, and Eric Thompson. Could I have the people that are here stand up so we can give them a round of applause? I know Sharon is here, stand up. I know Eric's here, stand up. Guillaume, stand up, please. No. So to take time during this conference to thank them, ask them how they did it, because we'll all be doing it. I'm going to be picking their brain because next year we're all coming to Fredericton. All right. I know that's going to be a little out of that's my home. I look forward to sharing it with people. Fredericton's a great city, has a lot to offer. The craft beer scene is, anyway, we won't get into that. So that's where the next conference is. So Fredericton was to be the destination in 2020. And when we were unable to meet because of COVID, we shifted that to Fredericton 2023. Okay. And so it's going to be it's on the river. It's a beautiful spot. I look forward to sharing Fredericton with people. That's the end of sort of the formal business, okay, that we have to share with you. And what we'll do is we'll move into the open forum. Again, if there's live questions, please stand up, come to a mic, If you're online, you can either call in or use the chat function. Okay. Are there any questions from the floor?
I have three actually from the people online. So Steve Piotrowski has asked, what were the stakeholders' biggest concern with regards to the PA title change?
I'll provide a little summary. One of them was quite specific. It was to do with the physician associate term, in that they just allocated a new term in their bylaws to associate physician. Okay, so they thought that particular turn of phrase would be confusing. Others were more sort of subjective, just didn't like the sound of it. But I know that's a vague answer, Steve. But they wasn't so concrete. They just didn't understand the point, and they didn't think that that represented the role. In our discussion yesterday, one of the thoughts we had was, if there was such a strong reaction to physician associate, is there some other term that would be palatable to the membership and that might be more palatable to the stakeholders? And so that's the sort of brain, we're going to go back to the drawing board a little bit on that. And I know that's going to be encompassed in the survey that they're going to put together and send to the membership. And part of the survey is going to poll the membership, and just to see how many people this is important to, and how dear this is, because there are some members this does not matter to. Okay. But there are some that it matters a great deal. So we have to get a sense, and I don't feel like I have a great sense right now how important this is to CAPA as a group. Okay, so we're going back to the drawing board a little bit, Steve, and we're going to get a little bit more information. Yeah, do you have the?
I would just share. Is this working? It is, okay. I would just share that we asked a very simple question of the medical associations and the regulatory bodies. In some ways, it wasn't fair, because their first response is more likely to be exactly that one, as folks who represent physicians. So if we were going to go down this road, it would, as an example, APA spent like 3 years on this work and millions of dollars, both asking the public, but also socializing their stakeholders on the need for a title change. So we haven't done any of that work. Frankly, I'm not sure that we could do that work, but medical associations in particular are geared at knee-jerk responses that will be more defensive of their members than. So you can imagine that if they were going to do a sort of a more qualitative response to that question, they too would have to do some work, some qualitative work with their members to explain it, socialize it better. So in some ways, I'm not surprised by the answer, but it also, I think, is very informative that if we were going to go down this road, we too would have to spend some time, money, and energy making the case, not just asking the question.
His second question is, can I also ask regarding CAPA's work on trying to get PAs noticed as duly qualified healthcare professionals?
Duly qualified. He means in the United States.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. No, actually, through Health Canada. So one of the biggest things right now, we're trying to increase prescribing abilities and also insurance forms. Right now, one of the biggest issues is Health Canada doesn't see PAs as duly qualified healthcare professionals. Although in Manitoba, CPSM does, they absolutely say we are. But I think it's one of the big things that Health Canada still doesn't have us as one of their duly qualified healthcare professionals. So I was just wondering if this is still being looked into.
Yeah, Steve, we spent a little time on this. Like, frankly, I should be careful how I say this. The likelihood that any government is going to go out of their way to allow another professional to prescribe narcotics is quite low. That's not all that you're speaking about, but it is perhaps the most important thing. So we certainly asked. I don't believe we got a response. I think we haven't stopped there, but that's just it's a little bit of an asterisk beside the request that at this moment in time, with federal and provincial relations the way that they are, with the I mean, people are talking about addictions and things like that a lot more than they have previously. So it's not off the table, but we got a pretty cold response to start. But we'll keep that work progressing.
Yeah, thanks. And I think one of the reasons for it is not to actually start prescribing opioids, but because there is such a huge opioid crisis, to actually help with the addiction. So being able to prescribe stuff like Suboxone. You know, at our clinic right now in family medicine, where the PAs are looking at working on something like this. So I think if we look at it in a different frame, rather than, you know, starting prescribing, but actually helping with the addictions issue, might go a little bit further forward with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
We have two questions. Oh, go ahead.
Let's take one from the floor, yeah.
So I'm Kaylin Hill. I'm a physician assistant with the family health team. Over the years, I've seen funding models or lack of funding models to be a big barrier in outpatient care, especially primary care. So I'm really pleased to hear that you're talking about exploring options for some government funded models. You mentioned fee for service. So I guess I have a two-part question. First off, the models that you're thinking about proposing, and I know it's early stages, but is it strictly, would it only apply to fee for service, or would it also include capitated models like FOS?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And again, I'll be candid. My assumption has been that the bigger problem is with fee for service, and that includes in primary care. Capitated models tend to have more flexibility in hiring health professionals, including PAs, because they roster and get an annual stipend. And in essence, a physician can grow their practice by taking on more patients, and revenue goes up and they can hire people. I realize there's some nuances there that would escape most and even escape me, even though I understand these matters better.
I guess it comes down to the whole shadow billing and what counts as supervision and all those things. So and so I guess my other part then is, are you essentially asking for a percentage of OHIP, like billing to OHIP at a percentage?
Well, so it is still a little bit premature, but the thesis is that if governments authorized, and I'm using that word on purpose, if governments authorized a group of physicians, and primary care isn't always at the top of the list, but neurology, geriatrics, psychiatry, authorized physicians to bill at a discounted rate for delegated work, then government would win because they would be paying less per service. Patients would win because they would be more patients would be able to be seen in those areas where we have a tremendous shortage of physicians, for example, who are generally practicing at fee for service. And PAs would win because there would be more jobs. And I left docs working in those areas would be able to grow their practice and grow their income. So that's the thesis. I take your point, and I would happily have a conversation about the shortcomings in a capitated model that we could see if we could include into the work. We're a little bit limited on how many examples we can do. So primary care is obviously on the list. And we're going to work through the board to figure out the others. Emergency departments, I feel like, could be high on the list, and then an example of a specialty, because that would tend to be, you'd be able to extrapolate that better, I think. So why don't we talk offline, and
That
you
sounds
can help
great.
me
Thank you.
understand.
I look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Okay, thanks, Kellen.
I have a question. So Karen Bilecki has asked, what about with regards to training spots? What about expanding to a master's bridge program? And then her second question was regards to where are we at with reciprocity with other countries such as the US?
Not sure how to answer the question about a master's bridge program. I know we're working with training institutions to add positions. Do we have a sense whether or not they're going to add undergrad positions or master's positions? I mean,
Well, I mean, I think it's really it's really a question for our certification council. They have set the accreditation standards through Accreditation Canada. We, as you likely remember, we danced with the Royal College on doing accreditation for us. And one of the things we talked through with the programs was to, and with the forces, frankly, was to make it a requirement that it would be a master's level program. We didn't go that route, not because of that particular piece, but the belief remains that that's where the profession will go. But I think that's something we would have to explore. And it's certainly not something that we have heard a whole lot of. Sandra, do you want to add anything to that? Or correct me?
So with regards to master's level, I believe that there is work being done both at McMaster and U of T to move in that direction eventually, but it's not done yet, but I know that they've been talking about moving to that. I believe that when we're talking with new programs that are being created, we are probably saying we'd like it to be a master's program. So there's that.
For sure. It's not a policy of the association for sure. So perhaps we should do some exploration on that. But I think we have come at this in the past from both the Royal College leaning to that leaning in that direction, but also to the criticisms we hear from some other health professional associations who shall remain nameless, the registered nurses, who sometimes criticize or make criticisms about the level at which PAs are trained. So, but again, we should probably do some exploration on that, but I think there's a heavy lean to continuing down the master's level program.
Her second question was about reciprocity. So I can speak to that from Canada's side, that we allow US PAs to write our exam. However, the door is still closed on the US side for us to write, or for Canadian PAs to write the AAPA or the NCCPA exams, sorry. And although PAC currently does not allow any other graduates except for Canadian PAs and US PAs to write their exam. And that's strictly based on not being able to know their accreditation process, about their programs, you know, that sort of stuff. So we'd have to do a lot of work from CAPA PAC perspective in order to understand their programs, what they offer, how they offer it, and, you know, the standards they have for graduating their students.
Just add, we were having some pretty meaningful conversations with the NCCPA pre-COVID. So frankly, we haven't talked to them since. So it's probably time that we revisited that. But admittedly, it hasn't been a giant priority for us to make it easier for Canadian PAs to go practice in the US. Which isn't a good member response, so I should take that back.
And I believe Steve Hall has his hands up, so I'd like to allow him.
Thanks, Sandra. Hi, guys. Stephen Hall, I'm the Manitoba director. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks to Kevin and Sandra, as well as Christy, for all of your work during this past year. Welcome to Brian. Thank you to everybody with the conference organizing. That's been great. My question is in regards to media relations, and I'm just wondering if there might be a need in the future. I'm seeing a lot of responses from Doctors Manitoba. I see they've become very much of an advocate lately. Basically, every news story has a quote from Docs Manitoba in terms of a physician perspective. In the court of public opinion, it seems to have a lot of sway. It seems to have some benefit in pressuring government and decision makers in influencing public opinion, as I already said. What are your thoughts on CAPA hiring an individual related to media relations? I know for the existing staff, it's probably a lot to put on somebody else's plate. But I'm wondering if there might be a need for that in the future and what your thoughts are.
I think that's a good idea. I mean,
Yeah, I don't think we, Steve, as a matter of course, I don't think we would do it any better if we had an individual doing it all the time. We have frankly, 3 of us that do it pretty regularly. Our Western manager does it. It's part of their duty. Christy does it as part of her duty, and I frankly do a lot of it as well. And we have the benefit of having board members in those in respective provinces. And I shared many examples of board members who were pretty active. So does that mean we could do more? Sure. We can absolutely always do more of almost everything. But I'll also share with you that earned media is no longer the gift it used to be. Less and less people are reading it. So things like creating our own content, like the video, is just as advantageous as getting a quote in the Toronto Star or the Vancouver Sun or whatever it may be. So I take your point, Steve, but right now my answer would be I don't think we would get much extra lift from having an individual just focused on media.
yeah, and I think in Western Canada, you saw a little lack, or sorry, not lack, but a gap there after Marina departed. And so, I mean, the part of the answer there is getting Brian fully integrated into the team and seeing what he can do there. And I'm sure there'll be great things that happen from that angle. So I take your point. Thank you very much for the question.
We just have a comment or a couple of comments from Rebecca Mueller. She says, if we are going to title change, I hope we do it sooner rather than later, because it's so much harder and more expensive to change the paperwork and legal side as we become regulated in more provinces.
Thank you for that comment. Yes.
And then with regards to prescribing, I think that was with regards to Steve Piotrowski's question. She said, for example, a PA in palliative care not prescribing opioids or managing them is actually harmful to patients and is very scope limiting.
I agree with that comment as well. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? No red cards. Yes, please.
Hello, Doris Hanson from Toronto. My question is not really, I just wanted to know about, have we ever looked into like workers' compensation funded PA job roles? As far as like not relying on like OHIP, but just more for workers' comp as a source of funding?
The simple answer is no. But I hear you, and you're right. WSIB and other organizations across the country do fund physicians directly. So I think there's an angle there we should put on our list.
Thank you. Some good suggestions and questions. Is there any more online ones, Sandra? No. Go around the room one more time. Any more for any more, as they say? Well, if there are no further questions, this will bring the open forum to a close. Thank you very much for your involvement and your keen comments and wise questions. You know, it doesn't have to end here. If you have questions, thoughts, or comments, the board wants to hear from you. So stop us in the hall, send us an email. I'm going to make one short announcement before we talk about adjournment. I think it's in tomorrow's session, or is it Sunday's session? The bone marrow transplant issues is not on the brochure anymore. It's not on the schedule. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll talk about adjournment. I request a motion to adjourn the meeting. So I'd like someone to move. Thank you. Al Zabon moves to adjourn, and Eric Mayo is a seconder. And so if we could have yays, and I mean yays, yeah. All right. Hey. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned at 4:51.
Thanks, Kevin.